Hey, I'm Shaye Warner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Hey folks, can I steal your attention away for less than a minute? Ranching is a business, and profitable ones don't happen by accident. If you're ready to run your operation with clarity, confidence, and a strategic plan, my new course, Profit Foundations for Ranchers, is built for you. You'll learn how to define measurable success for your ranch, identify where profit is slipping through the cracks, and put systems in place that help you make better decisions faster. This isn't the theory. It's a practical, ranch-tested business training designed to improve your bottom line. It's the same strategies I use on our own operation. Visit casualcattleconversations.com to learn more, and the direct link is in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the episode. Hey folks, today it is a solo episode with yours truly, and we're going to be talking about why my husband and I and my father-in-law do genomic testing on our commercial heifers. This podcast, it's not sponsored. It's just a candid, this is a practice that we personally really appreciate after going on 3 years of using it. And it's something that I wanted to talk about with you and share more of my experience because it has gotten brought up on the show quite a few times by various guests, even different companies, etc. So I just want to talk about what it looks like in application and the different benefits that we've seen on our operation from it. Now, I do want to put a little plug in that for those of you who don't know, Philip and I are expecting our first baby this winter. So I have been working really hard, and my guests very graciously have been recording content in advance, and my team has been doing amazing things to make sure that we can keep the podcast up and rolling, week after week. But if there is a week where you're like, Shaye didn't put out an episode today, I will be back. It's just, we're probably adjusting to life with a new family member. So I do just want to say that myself so that you guys are all aware. But back to genomic testing heifers, which you may hear some people refer to simply as DNA testing heifers. Really, the reason we looked into this is because when Philip and I got married a little over 2 years ago, and I started kind of stepping into my role on the cattle management side and trying to take some of that over, I knew we were going to have to select heifers. And I had helped select heifers previously when we were engaged, but I felt really in the dark because, I could ask my husband and father-in-law for cow history, and I could look at the phenotype, and that was it. And if you're unaware, my background was I always grew up with commercial cattle, but also seed stock cattle. And so I got to watch my parents go through and make that shift from being predominantly a commercial operation into what is now solely a seed stock operation. And with being involved on the seed stock side and raising bulls, having that extra data, having those EPDs, specifically genomically enhanced EPDs, in combination with phenotype when selecting bulls, heifers, whatever kind of decision you were making about who got to stay or go or who got to be bred to which bulls, was such an advantage compared to simply selecting off of phenotype. I felt like it took a lot of risk out of it. So then, fast forwarding back to that first year where Philip and I were married, and I got to thinking about making heifer selections. Who gets to stay, who gets to go? And it really stressed me out because I just felt like I had no clue what we had. I had no benchmark, We had loosely talked about goals for this is where we want to take the herd, but how could I know if we were actually moving the herd in that direction if I didn't actually know where the herd was at today? And so we talked it through, and really I was kind of nervous. I thought it would be a harder sell for my husband and father-in-law, but honestly, they are so involved on the precision side of farming with their own independent agronomy work and crop consulting work that when I explained it, they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so that's kind of how we got started and why we did it. It was really easy for me to jump into because I was used to, taking these samples and familiar with the process on the seed stock side. So I think that eased a lot of it, but that's partially, and really, I shouldn't say partially, that's the main reason we got into the genomic testing. It was like, we had a good year selling calves. We had a few extra dollars to play with. So let's try it and see if we like it. I want to talk about the process quick of genomic testing. So this is a partial box with the company we use. Don't mind my notes on there. But you can see that, you can kind of see, it's called a TSU, so it's a tissue sample that you take from the ear. And you can see those empty boxes. Those are just numbers that we recently did before recording this. And those 3 samples at the top, those are unused samples. So that's kind of what they look like. I really had the best of intentions when I was preparing for this. I was going to take a video of the whole process and show you guys everything it looks like and how it works on our operation. But we were just having one of those days and it didn't happen. So you can see a picture on the thumbnail of what the applicator gun looks like, etc. It's really a seamless process. It does not take a lot of time. It's really as fast as popping an ear tag in, honestly, because you're taking that tissue sample from the ear. And so you collect that sample and then you send that back to the company of your choice and they will run that information. And then what you get back as a producer is kind of a whole spreadsheet that looks at each individual animal and it identifies a bunch of different traits that kind of help you sort through, which heifers are more maternal, which ones are more terminal, which ones are kind of somewhere in the middle. And it gives you a score from 1 to 10, or at least the company that I use does. And it just helps you see when you're out there looking at heifers, which ones you can select to move the herd in the direction that you want. Do you really need to focus on more maternal traits? Can you put in a few more carcass traits, be a little heavier on that side? It's really dependent on what you need as a producer. But that's kind of what the process looks like. It's really simple. One step I didn't say is like before you send the samples back in, you fill out a spreadsheet, but I think that took me all of 20 minutes this year. So it did not take me long at all to do. And the information we got back was really an eye-opener. And I was expecting that because what I had heard from other producers who had been doing this is sometimes you'll get information back and you look at that heifer and you say, there's no way she's not going to stick around, because stayability is kind of one of those things that genomically you can test for. And you can look at it and say, there's no way. I mean, her mother's 11 years old. She's still in the herd, it should make sense. But then learning from past producers' mistakes, they've said that they've kept those individuals and they don't stick around long enough to pay their way or earn their keep, however you want to look at it. And so that's something we keep in mind. I will say the first year we used it, I don't think we used it to its fullest potential because we were really skeptical of some things. But the 1 or 2 heifers that came up open that year, after the first year we used it, we went back and looked at their data and we probably shouldn't have kept them anyways. So in that sense, I felt like it almost paid for itself there. But since I've already kind of shifted onto the reasons that, or ways that it kind of pays off, So obviously we use it for heifer selection. So what really matters to Philip and I is right now we're selling cows off the calf, but we really need to focus on maybe a little more of those maternal traits more than we thought, because there had been a big push for weaning weight, and it was starting to catch up to us. And so now we know where we can put a little more focus. And additionally, we can look at that two different ways. So we kind of have a red Angus herd and a black Angus herd. And for the most part, they run together, but breeding groups are separate. And so we can even analyze that information a little differently as years go on for which black bulls are going to be right and which red bulls are going to be right based on where those individual groups are at too. So you can split it out however you want. Now, with bull selection, it really took a lot of the guessing out and personally gave me a lot more confidence. And I felt like I was confident in selecting bulls before. Like, I raised bulls. I loved livestock judging as a kid. Like, it really seemed simple to me, but having that information compared to not was a game changer as far as, okay, here are the sire groups we should maybe be looking at. Here are the individual bulls we should be looking at based on their own genomically enhanced CPDs. And it really narrowed down the process and took a lot of stress out of the process because we knew we weren't guessing. It also gave us more confidence if we had to put in that extra bit or two to get the bull we wanted. And so those are the primary benefits that we've seen from using it, are that simply the more confidence in selecting heifers that are going to stay around, and then more confidence in bull selection. And I know you might not think, well, confidence might not have a direct return on investment, but it does, because it's not just confidence, it's you're truly knowing which decisions to make, and those are going to pay off when you're selecting the right females to stick around and you're selecting the right bulls to move your herd forward faster, and just simply having that benchmark. Now, we have this information and we primarily just use it for ourselves. We're not involved in any supply chains yet, or we haven't done any parentage testing or anything along those lines, but it's something we throw around. Regardless, because we are testing our heifers, that gives us an idea of, okay, that's where our whole herd is at. So what that does is it gives us an idea of where our steers are at too, which is, in the fall, predominantly what we're focusing on, because as I mentioned earlier, we're selling right off the cow for the most part. Occasionally we will background, but it's nice to have that information as well. And there are some producers who use that information if they're selling privately, or can use that information at the barn. However they're selling, they can say this is where the herd benchmarks at for carcass traits, etc., whatever matters. So that's also something to keep in mind. One thing that I didn't mention that I probably should have, I talked about how there was some information that came back that was a little bit of an eye-opener. Like, these cows had been in the herd for a long time, and now this test is saying their heifers aren't going to last. That seemed tough. But then in a few of those cases, my husband actually went back and looked at, okay, we have kept heifers out of these cows because we really like the cow. And guess what? They didn't stick around either before the testing. And so there is some of that too, where maybe you could look back on past information to make those decisions, but the testing really does reassure or reaffirm that, those right genetics just aren't coming out in these calves for whatever reason, and they're not staying. So I would honestly say, for as many times as there were some hard truths to look at that data and where you question it, there were equally as many times where it's like, okay, yes, this makes sense. I need to try and not be as biased. And so that's something just to keep in mind as well. So that's my little bit on genomic testing for replacement heifers and why we use it, why we like it. I talked a lot about the pros. As far as the cons go, I mean, I guess it's an additional input, but I already talked about how different ways that we see it pay off, but that's going to be dependent on your operation and, of course, how you use it. If you aren't going to use the information for your selection decisions, then it's not going to pay off. Like, it's something you need to, if you're going to invest in the technology, you need to use that information to put yourself forward. It is another step in the process, but like I said, for us, it doesn't add that much more time. We take the samples after we wean. You can take them way earlier than that if you want. It's entirely up to you. So that's what we do. That's what we like it. If you have questions about and just want like an honest answer about my experience with the technology and how we use it, beyond what we've talked about in this podcast, go ahead and send me an email. And you can do that just by going to my website, casualcattleconversations.com. And if you fill out the contact us form or contact Shaye form, that will go straight to my email, and then we can have a great conversation there. But like I said, this is just my candid experience that I wanted to share with you all because it is something that's been very beneficial to us and something I know some of you are already using, as well as something maybe some of you are interested in, or maybe some of you have tried it and don't like it. Either way, I think it's really cool, really interesting, especially because it's such a standard in the seed stock world, and to be able to give commercial producers access to some of this information so that they can make more informed decisions is a really big game changer. But with that, you know where to find me, and happy ranching, folks.